It's still early in the portal recruiting phase, but UCLA, with 11 commits now, could they push top 10 transfer class for 2025?
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for making this show your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever it's your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for your support. It's your team every day. The college football playoff is here, and you don't want to miss a moment of the action. The college football playoff is presented by Allstate. Begins with 4 first-round games, December 20th and 21st on ESPN, ABC, TNT, and Max. And just like that playoff's getting started, we're getting started right here on UCLA's march, football-wise, to 2025. DeShaun Foster and company, with his new recruiting team with a full offseason to recruit, is doing things. We already saw what he was able to do leading into the class of 25 recruiting. We saw him pick up some 26 recruits. His new assembled unit has been going to work in the portal. And right now, the Bruins currently have 11 commits, possibly and most likely quite a few more for this team that wants to reload, rebuild, and get better. And my thought is, can UCLA push getting a top 10 transfer ranking, right? Last time they had a top 10 transfer ranking, UCLA in 2022, 2023, that was under Chip Kelly, when he figured out how to get a top 10 class. But those were with some specific NFL super talented players that have been on UCLA's roster for a couple of years. Some guys are already in the NFL. UCLA right now is currently sitting in the top 15 on the rankings right now. Depending on where you're looking, 24/7 Sports has UCLA number 14 on a transfer portal recruiting ranking. That's with 11 guys. That's with the latest incoming player, Nico Davillier, a transfer from Arkansas, his home state, a D lineman, a big boy, I believe 6'5" on the D line. He's played a little bit with Arkansas for a few years over there, but now makes his way from the SEC to the Big Ten, and most importantly to the West Coast to play with the Bruins, who UCLA needed some size, some additional talent, some add-ons to this D line. Because let's face it, they did their best, but when Chip Kelly was going out there and getting D3 to D1 recruits, getting a guy who didn't play as much with late, like Collins H-Spong, with some injuries, not to put it all on these guys, but Chip Kelly really dropped the ball in recruiting, and knowing that the Murphy twins are going and Latu were gone heading into the 24 season. So DeShaun Foster was behind it all, trying to keep his team together in 24. And now you could see, probably after a lot of practices, he knew exactly where to go. You bring in a Davillier. You bring in an edge from Utah. UCLA has absolutely stacked their offensive line, and that doesn't include somebody who just took an official visit a couple days ago. Kali Tafai, a former Washington offensive lineman from Lawndale in SoCal, and just took a UCLA official visit over the weekend. So the Bruins are maybe keying in on that. There's the potential for Coach Meat's son, Cole Martin, to make his way to UCLA. He's crystal balled by Greg Biggins of 24/7 Sports as his son to go from Arizona, played a bit at Oregon where his dad was, and then now that his dad's coming from Michigan State, wants to potentially go to UCLA. That's not official. That's a potential, leaning likely. So there's 12 to maybe 13 guys. But if UCLA is going to get over the hump, get to a top 10 class, let's compare what UCLA had in 22 when they had Chip Kelly. What made that class so lethal in terms of transfers? Well, let's talk about Jalen Davies. Started for a couple years. I think that was a good get from Oregon. Sneaky good, 3-star transfer like he is right now heading out of UCLA. He's getting some money. He's getting some good offers. UCLA, I thought, did well getting Davies for those couple of years. The Murphy twins. Murphy twins were fantastic. Great gets, great steal in a find for the UCLA portal. Raekwon O'Neal coming in from Rutgers. Fantastic. Let's roll down. Oh, Darius Moisow. Absolutely fantastic. And then you got Latu and Jake Bobo. So that's like 6 to 7 elite NFL talented players or college players for UCLA that had a significant impact. And there's still guys on this list who I didn't even mention that have played for UCLA or have been sticking in the starting lineup. So that's what made that transfer class. And then top 9, you could argue if that one was even better with how the players panned out. Not exactly the quarterback hype, but all those guys that I mentioned were pretty solid hits. Then you look at the 23 class, UCLA, when they went to the transfer portal, brought in a Keanu Williams. He's still there, trying to recover from injury. Hopefully going to be a big, impactful player for UCLA in 25 as the Bruins want to revamp the D-line with the new Utah edge, with Nico Davillier from Arkansas, all that together to bring in some incoming freshmen and more. UCLA is turning into a team that, hey, their defensive front might be a little bigger and better and have more depth in 2025. Now you look at the rest of the 2023 class. You had Keanu Williams. You brought in Kyle Ford, bust. You brought in Kadir Kunta. Maybe didn't necessarily work as well. J. Michael Sturdivant, for what his numbers say, very talented. I thought it worked out. Jordan Anderson, 4-star transfer, interesting. Then you brought in Carson Steele, 4-star transfer, split some time with TJ Harden. Spencer Holsteg, who was a starting O-lineman. Femi Oladejo, who came in and I think ended up playing pretty well for UCLA over those last couple of years. And I liked what he did, turning into more of an edge inside linebacker this year. I think, obviously, for that transfer class, that was ranked number 10, just behind the 22 class. I think there's a vast gap there. And I could argue that class that ended up having 14 incoming transfers, this UCLA class could have, without the skill positions, right? Because you focus a lot on what Kyle Ford was bringing in, what Carson Steele and J. Michael Sturdivant. Right now, UCLA's class is filling, I think, more needs, more question marks that we had in 24, maybe 23, heading into the 25 season with, hey, all right, they got a receiver, but they've really pumped the brakes, at least of the initial commits, at getting a big dog in the transfer portal with skill positions. They've gone offensive linemen, defense, a lot of DBs to replenish what was lost from the 23 season with Humphrey and Ramsey going in the portal and finding a way to gather in talent that will stay here for more than a year / be still competitive in 25. So I'm liking where UCLA is, maybe more along the lines of a 23 class that was pretty solid. And I think if UCLA to push themselves into a top 10 class in the transfer portal, they're going to have to go get a quarterback. Now, obviously, UCLA has already been mentioned at being in on Fernando Mendoza, and there's potential other names. The question for UCLA is, do they value getting a 1-year guy, a 2-year potential guy like Fernando Mendoza, who's a redshirt sophomore, but is NFL eligible immediately? Not that he's ready to go right now, but if he has a good year at UCLA, might find somewhere else. When you transfer every year, guys who come in can easily come out the next year. But for the Bruins to get into that top 10, you need a running back. They were in on the Washington State kid, but he ended up choosing between Arizona and Utah for the time being. Obviously, some of the big types of quarterbacks, Mateer followed his offensive coordinator. Mensa went elsewhere. Malik Murphy went to Oregon State, I think to the shock of many. Yet UCLA, I think, would be a perfect fit to bring in Fernando Mendoza if that's where they're going. And that would creep them up to the top 10. And for them to get that love in the top 10, to truly round out this portal class, it would involve 1, maybe 2 skill positions, all right, combined between quarterback, a receiver / running back, or a tight end. And yes, as y'all have been saying it, building up the O-line, beefing it up. The more talent, the bigger they are, the better they are, the more it'll help UCLA, as there's still going to be at least a couple more. UCLA last year was still recruiting the portal a couple days before the season. Last year's team, which is not a fair thing for DeShaun Foster, had 21 incoming transfers and ranked 44th. And some guys he got right before the season, like, say, like a Jalen Berger, pretty good get and could be a key piece for UCLA this year. So some of these guys UCLA brought in 24 and 23 could still have impactful seasons in 25 and impact how the post rankings reevaluation looks like. I do think with what UCLA is doing, and they did announce they have a new secondary coach in the safeties. Gabe Lynn is coming to be a secondary coach with Coach Meat. They've officially announced Andy Kwan on the O-line. So DeShaun Foster is not only bringing in new talent, bringing in guys, which is what you have to do year in and year out, reevaluating who needs more NIL money, who needs to be convinced to stay to get more playing time this year, and who's better than the guys you have now. I think with the coaching staff and the recruiters are doing a better job of that. And, hey, they got rid of offensive coordinator Bieniemy. They got rid of Castillo, and they bring in Andy Kwan, who's worked with Alabama, comes over from Arkansas State, officially announced from the UCLA website today. And a sneaky one, Gabe Lind coming over from Colorado. He knows what Colorado's been doing, what that hype train could be. And hopefully with Coach Meek can coach up these guys into a good secondary. We've seen the passion coach Ikaika Malloy is, and the super cocky confidence, just the simple California cool Tino Sinceri looks to bring when he came to visit UCLA after being announced as the OC, as he currently prepares for Indiana's game against Notre Dame. Ironically, UCLA does go to Bloomington this year, but he's going to finish off his season there. All the staff changes. And then the promotions for Scott White, the promotion for Jerry Neuheisel, evaluating what are the coaches we need to stay, who needs less on their plate like a Malloy, and making sure they stay and help UCLA. 2025 is looking to be a fun one. And until they get that big name piece, I think the Bruins will sit outside the top 10. They're sitting borderline top 15. They could end up as a top 20 transfer portal class where a lot of these pieces might not be eye-popping the most, but fill the gaps of needs UCLA's needed last season or two. But until they bring in a quarterback, if they believe they need one, I think most of us believe I'd like to see a quarterback in, at least for the fun of it, a receiver of sorts, that would add on to it. That would just add on to the fun. Even though the receiver room is pretty stacked, running back, we'll see how the veterans mix in and the youngsters come in. And then tight end, obviously they're losing Matsuda. What can the Bruins do to build that position up again from a position of strength now going to the youngsters? Right now, 14th in 24/7 Sports, depending on where they go, could slide outside the top 20, heading into the top 10. Next, UCLA men's basketball takes on North Carolina in the CBS Sports Classic at Madison Square Garden. What are some keys to note for the Bruins as they take on the Tar Heels in what is a big resume builder despite UNC being 6-5? Weird, huh? We'll talk about it next. It's that time of the year. The college football playoff is back, and with the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports coverage of the college football playoff begins on December 21st, starting with the college football playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern. Leading into our first matchup, the Southern Methodist University Mustangs, SMU, battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the college football playoff presented by Allstate, live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. All right, heading into segment 2, we're talking UCLA men's basketball against North Carolina. This is one of those games where you sit there like, okay, UCLA might be mildly favored in this game all the way across the country on a neutral site. Day game, the Bruins, I believe, are currently flying here on this Thursday, December 19th, to get there early, prepare, get adjusted slightly to the East Coast time zone as much as you can in a 2-day swing. And this is going to be the blueprint for UCLA. Lots of East Coast swings. They're going to go back to New Jersey. They're going to go to Maryland. They have to go to the states of Illinois and Indiana 2 or 3 times, twice in conference into Indiana for the Big Ten tournament. So a lot of traveling east for the Bruins as it is as a West Coast team, but even more so as a Big Ten conference member, they get their first little foray into it to New York. A lot further than most of their trips, but they're preparing for that. North Carolina presents an interesting matchup, a stylistic challenge. I did have a longer chat with Isaac Shea, the Locked On College Basketball and Locked On Tar Heels host, which I plan on posting, I believe, the Friday, the December 20th, right before. But right now, the thought is it's a stylistic challenge. North Carolina plays quick, up-tempo, likes to score compared to what Prairie View A&M did in a smaller, different bunch, what UCLA faced Tuesday night. And what we're going to learn about this UCLA team is how good they are defensively, RJ Davis is having a similar 3-point slump like Caleb Love is. However, against non-big name teams, the non-power fours, the mid-majors, there's always seemingly been a guy that's gone off and hit a lot of shots. 6 of 7, 5 of 6 from 3, even dating back to that secret scrimmage against San Diego State. Somebody has gone off and hit a lot of shots from 3, even though the Bruins have great defenders like Kobe Johnson. Mick Cronin gives a lot of love to Sky Clark, which is why he's in the starting lineup night in and night out. The Bruins are supposed to be able to guard all these guys, and yet here they are at times failing to defend a 3, even though the numbers might not show it team-wise. One guy tends to go off against the Bruins. If RJ Davis does, it'd be a struggle. Yet the one thing North Carolina does not have in this matchup that UCLA tends to struggle with is consistent size. I did talk to Isaac Shade about this, and he's like, yeah, these are, from a roster construction standpoint, pretty similar. Not a big man that's truly reliable. UCLA is not the stage where they can trust Adai Mara, trust William Kyle III. That's just not where they are. They're playing the small guard lineup, and UCLA has the size advantage over North Carolina's guards. So I think they'll be able to pressure, frustrate, and get North Carolina out of sorts. But as we've seen with UCLA this season, they go through spurts from 5 to 10 minutes that they just forget to play basketball. They just turn it over, they miss, and that forces them to come back, play defense. They're out of sorts, and it can lead to a layup fest for the opposition since they have no true rim protector if Mara is not out there or if Kyle is still sitting on the bench. If UCLA is small and they can't figure it out offensively, that is where North Carolina can figure it out. Now, if the Bruins can get 8 productive minutes from Adai Mara, right? Like a 6 points, 4 rebounds, and then you bring in another strong 5 minutes from William Kyle, he gets 4 points, 4 rebounds. Together, those two guys would combine for a double-double. It's not the way you like to think about it, but if Kyle and Mara in this game combine as a single player, close to 20 minutes and a double-double, I would think that's a successful night for the UCLA big men. And as long as UCLA doesn't get feasted alive on points in the paint and rebounding, which North Carolina should not be able to do with its lack of size on the post, then I think UCLA can go and win this game in New York, be a resume builder for a North Carolina team that was a minute away from taking down an unbeaten Florida on a neutral court, that's been very close to going to Kansas and winning, has found themselves down big early. So look for UCLA in this North Carolina game to potentially be up 10, 12, 13 points, like they were up 8 against Arizona, like they're up early against Oregon. It could be that similar type of game where UCLA jumps out early, takes an early lead, and then North Carolina sprints to the end and the Bruins are holding on for dear life. I know we're tired of those games. That's kind of how this one might play out, where the Bruins figure it out, North Carolina stops them, the Bruins play sloppy, they go back up, and then North Carolina rushes in after a sloppy player, 2 there from UCLA and some missed free throws. Because this game, unfortunately, I think is going to come down to, can UCLA get to the free throw line and convert? It's one thing to get there, but if Sebastian Mack, if healthy and playing, can't make it, if William Kyle is shooting 4 and missing them all, if the Bruins are going 2 of 4 instead of 4 of 4, that could cost them in this game where North Carolina can score a lot of points. A lot of players that had big impacts like Seth Trimble and, as Isaac will say, is Cadeau. UCLA, a lot of guys to guard. They have a size advantage of sorts. I think they might have a backcourt advantage defensively compared to the super offensive powered North Carolina team. This is a game UCLA should win. Not by a lot, not dominant, but it's a game where stylistically, if Cronin's team is up to his defensive standards, they should keep North Carolina to the low 70s, high 60s, and the Bruins should be able to win this like a 73-69, 73-68. Right now, this game's being slotted potentially as a bucket difference between these two teams. That's where UCLA should go. We'll have a more detailed talk about these two teams in upcoming Locked On UCLA episodes and crossovers. I just think this would be a good win for, obviously, a huge one to get. Even though North Carolina would fall to 500, it's not going to look as juicy as it did in the preseason when Arizona, Gonzaga, and North Carolina were all top 10 teams. Now, only Gonzaga is, and they've taken some weird losses, but you still have to beat the North Carolinas of the world to make sure you're solidified in the tournament. Next, UCLA women taking on Creighton. Creighton in one of their one-off non-conference battles, like they've been to Paris, they'll go to San Francisco, and eventually they'll go to the East Coast for another one on MLK Day. All that and more on Locked On UCLA. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So we get a hunch in the middle of the game, you check out the latest stats, view the live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. Again, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch, you make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Right now, I got to encourage you to go check out Prize Picks. This Prize Picks is the place that's America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. It's the best place to get in on the real money sports action because you can win up to 1,000 times your money on Prize Picks. Prize Picks now offers MasterCard for a quick and easy deposit into your account this sports season. All you got to do is pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win that 1,000 times your cash. It's a holiday season because there's 2 free picks in December from Prize Picks. They're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Picksmas. If you think James Cook is going to run more than 60 yards next week, or Joe Burrow is going to throw more than a touchdown and a half, cook up hot takes with your friends and win real money this football season when you and your crew run your game on Prize Picks. Download the app, use the code LOCKEDONCollege. You get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app, use the code LOCKEDONCollege. You get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. It's Prize Picks. Run your game. Cruising on, final segment here of the Locked On UCLA podcast. We're talking UCLA women's hoops. The Bruins are taking off to San Fran to take and battle Creighton, a 9-2 team, a scrappy bunch of Blue Jays that started off the season 1-2, flirting with the top 25, and have now won 8 in a row. They did beat a Nebraska team that's currently ranked. They lost to South Dakota State on the road and lost to a then 10th ranked Kansas State team on the road in Manhattan. What is this Blue Jay team going to do for this UCLA women's team that destroyed Long Beach, beat up Cal Poly, and then played without Lauren Betts in that game? Well, if UCLA has some availability of their biggest and best player, they're going to have a huge size advantage. And even if they don't, they still have a pretty good size advantage for a Creighton team that currently has their tallest player listed at 6'3", Elizabeth Gentry, a freshman from Littleton, Colorado. And for that player, she's played 4.5 minutes. So their tallest player has not had a big impact this season. There's Brooke Luttrell. She's their next tallest. She plays 12.5 minutes. So this is a Creighton team that plays with guards, that likes to play quick. They average close to 80 points per game. They outscore their opponents by 12, and they are lethal from 3. A team that's just a shade under 39% as a team from downtown. So they'll take it religiously, and generally they'll make it. Where the Bruins are going to have to be able to do is guard the 3-point line against Creighton. 2, depending on the availability of Lauren Betts and how that all plays out, and the availability of everybody, right? Gardner didn't play the Long Beach game. Lauren Betts not available in that Cal Poly game before they pulled away and dominated late. You're going to have to look out for Creighton's Lauren Jensen, averages 19 a game, 89% from 3, 89% from the free throw line, 41% from 3, and nearly 50% from the field, while Morgan Malley is a 47% free three-point shooter. Both her and Jensen have hit 27 threes in a varying amount, but just about anybody on this roster for Creighton has been capable of hitting threes. They're a pretty good free throw shooting team, over 80%. They like to get out and score. Most of their best appearances this season have been when they get out, they run, and they shoot the 3. One of UCLA's best performances came when they D'd up South Carolina and make them look like they didn't belong on the court. Instead of doing so in the post and being more physical, this is where we're going to see Corey Close have to lean on her guard. She's talked about with London Jones in the press conference after the Long Beach game, even though she's cold from three, she does winning plays. She can bring the ball up the floor. She's being asked to do more now that Charisma Osborne is gone defensively. We're going to have to see that for UCLA in this game. We're going to see the Kiki Rice intangibles defensively. And how does a true freshman, Elena Arnasalo, bring into that defensively when there's more asked of her? Now, some of the best players will handle the ball in the country. Paige Beckers will see the ball in her hand. You'll see Juju Watkins with the ball in her hand. But this is a different matchup when you've got players who are pretty crafty defensively, like Creighton can facilitate the basketball, have close to a 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio, while also drilling threes, and it can happen from multiple angles. Morgan Malley, Lauren Jensen, those two combine to average close to 36 points per game. But then it kind of sprinkles throughout the rest of the starting five into the bench. All right, they can hit 1 to 2 threes, and once that happens, that could start to add up if UCLA is not hitting them between Gardner, between London Jones. And if the Bruins aren't able to take advantage of their interior physical presence, which they have the advantage on basically every team in the country this year. Normally that's South Carolina. Normally teams have maybe one player, but nobody has somebody that has just as good as Lauren Betts. Now, if she's not available, that would be quite interesting because we've seen the Bruins are a very different team without her. That would mean Dugalich has to step up, which I think she could, and could definitely take advantage of this matchup. Another team that's similar in size to Long Beach but can shoot much better. Dugalich can be asked to go for a 10 and 8 day, right? 10 points, 12 points, and 8 rebounds. Maybe we'll see some of the younger freshmen. Maybe this could be a game where Janiah Barker, who's pretty good at handling the ball, takes it to the rack, and UCLA might feast on points in the paint while hoping and playing good defense that they just don't live and die by Creighton outscoring them from the three-point line. So perimeter defense is key while the Bruins impose their physical will inside. That is the difference between UCLA asserting their number one authority versus the potential upset. Because this game will be fun to watch, I think, unless UCLA wins this one by 20-25 and continues to prove that they're clear-cut number one team in the country, which I think they are. But Creighton plays that style of basketball, and it's on a neutral site. You got finals, wonders about availability for different players at this point at the recording of this podcast. That could make it a little interesting and dicey that if they go off from three, like Colorado did against LSU early on last year when LSU was the preseason number one, that could make for an interesting night. I don't think so, but it's something to look forward to. And until then, get your hands up, Bruins fans. 8 clap time, baby. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA, fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked On UCLA. Zach signing off. Go Bruins.